I was talking last night. I had dinner with Timony last night and somebody else in the industry, and we were talking about avatars. Of course, Edward Sachi is going to have a conference on virtual beings. So this is something I've been thinking about, Matt. You
Sure.
there?
Yeah.
Have you been thinking about virtual avatars? I know you have been, so I'm leading you. This is, what are your
I
thoughts
mean,
about virtual avatars?
it's
Oh,
not something we're working on, but we're obviously building the. I mean, we're focused on reality itself. So from our point of view, we're more interested in how do we do, um, like real time capture of people in 3D. Like right now, and Apple's just shown their people segmentation, and we've got similar technology to that goes a bit further than theirs, but it's still basically a 2D cutout of a person in real time. And we, we're working to actually get the 3D model of a person captured in real time. Not just the skeleton, but actual like 3D volume of that person,
that's
and
cool.
do it on a phone in real time for multiple people. And we know how to do it. It's just we just got to get a bunch of other stuff done first. But once you've got a 3D model of real people, then the line between avatar and reality starts to blur, and yeah, things get interesting. But I mean, obviously, won't be
But
all.
why is the difference between, from a technical perspective, like capturing in 2D versus 3D? Because you can always be replacing what you see, which is ultimately you're looking at a screen over the world, with a 3D object anyway. It's just masked, right? So what advantage do you have actually capturing the 3D person?
Um, just a sec. I just need to step out for a minute. I've got
Yeah, no worries.
booming in the background. Yeah.
Yep, no problem. Um, Hi everybody. Um, Matt, we Matt and I have two kids, and they need some support right now. So Matt will be back in a minute. Um, and let's see who else is here. Joe. Joe's not in yet. Okay. Well, Mike, back to you. Hi.
Hello.
um, just continuing that conversation spontaneously.
Yeah.
The
I
thing
guess
that the thing, yeah.
I was going to say I was talking about like a line. I was
Oh
playing
yeah.
a character similar to myself, but since the avatar was cartoonish, you kind of inevitably feel detached from it, um, which is interesting. These avatars can like kind of pull a character out of you, but they can also make it harder to be yourself, I think.
Um,
I'm
yeah.
back. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Um, yeah, Mike was just saying something interesting that when he's in avatar mode, when it's more realistic, when it's more like him, and he's an avatar, he feels more inhibited than he does dressed as somebody else. Which actually makes complete sense because that's what it's like. I think when you're acting, um, yeah,
Yeah,
being able to play another role. Hmm.
I mean that's in a VR context, I guess, but we're like entirely focused on AR. So it's when I
Yeah,
point the camera at you, or someone points a camera at you, what do they see? And there's been some demos of obviously we did some stuff with Aphex Twin where we just have all these crazy psychedelic effects, and
yeah,
Zach Lieberman did one where he sort of did a sort of very crude diminished reality type of thing, or a pixelated version of you, but
yeah,
you can, we see it as like, how do you want to dress yourself? What virtual clothes do you want to put on your real body when people look at you? And
yeah.
that could be like an entire reskinning of you into a robot or something. But it could also just be a hat. So
Yeah, it's interesting because working at Adobe, and we talk about avatars a bit and representation of you in all different ways, from an enterprise to an individual. And it's always about the creative expression that you have. But Zach Lieberman's taking it completely the other way, and he's saying, how can you actually hide from being represented? How can you have some privacy? And so, and he's been thinking about this in little ways for years. Like when I was working with him a year ago, he was doing it then. I think he represents a lot of people who feel like, I would actually like to have more privacy than I want to have creative expression, but I also want to have privacy. So Matt, I was wondering, like, there's, from the other perspective, this is how people see me, but also what about other people seeing you and overlaying you as invisible or you as somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, right now everything is kind of, it's my phone or sort of that, or my camera that I, change the way other people look. They don't get a say in what runs on my camera.
Yeah.
There's an interesting, I mean, not interesting, but something that's needed is an ability for, my camera to maybe query your profile and just check how would you like to be represented. And then obviously my app can make a decision. Do I want to render you the way you asked to be represented, or do I just want to ignore that and render you the way I want to see you? No, I'm not aware of anybody building that capability yet, but it has to exist.
Yeah.
And yeah, yes. So I don't know. I mean, there's a sort of whole then aspect of, okay, I've published the way I'd like to be rendered when people look at me in AR, but that all then needs to be sort of interoperable and shared in an app. And I don't know if it's going to be some open standard or if it's just probably going to be something completely inside Snapchat or inside Instagram, and we end up having to use something like Gravatar or some third party virtual identity provider.
I'll try to get Trevor to join us. It would be really interesting to hear what he has to say about that. But besides Brood and Lil Michaela, I wonder if there's anyone else who's listening today who's thinking about this topic and has anything interesting to say about diminished reality and being able to, like, now with Matt's technology, and also Apple's released something similar, but Matt's is much better, being able to take something out of let's remove something from reality and or replace it as well. And what does that mean? Like, has anyone been doing any creator tools or been experimenting in that and discovered some really interesting insights? Speak up. We'd love to hear from you. Do you have anyone out there? Somebody just ran right through me. It feels weird.
we're obviously talking to retailers and other OEMs and stuff about this type of idea of diminished reality, and to be honest, it just blows their mind. They didn't even imagine
Right.
it. So no one's working on tools or anything. And even the absolute latest state of the art technology it's still a hack, and it's very, very hard to do in the real world. All the little demo videos that you've seen were very carefully staged, and they don't really do it properly. They just kind of smear around where you are supposed to be. I think it'll be a little while before that diminished reality experience is really really high quality visually, but yeah, we're getting there. It's definitely doable now, even at lower quality.
Yeah, that's interesting. Sorry, I left and came back for a second. I know we're kind of getting a little sidetracked, but just one more thing is the point of, like, having something replaced that's completely realistic, like in movies today. You can't tell when something's fake or not, even when it's an avatar of a person. Is it really the person acting or not? And we're not even close to that yet with AR, but we will be one day. Is there a difference? What is the difference between now and then that is going to affect what we think of reality as fake and real?
Um, Processing power, mostly. Um, and a lot of that is the neural network co-processors that are coming. I mean, that's the constraint that we're hitting. Probably, high resolution cameras and screens are always going to be helpful, but adding more pixels just again gets constrained by the GPU and the neural processor pretty quick. So I think all the you know VFX stuff is definitely doable on a phone at whatever quality you need. It just you can't process it in a 30th of a second. Um,
Yeah.
so it'll be several generations of mobile chipset and some smart algorithms to probably offload some processing into the cloud and just keep the stuff that's changing in the background, keep that updated quickly. But I think it'll happen faster than people expect.
What will happen faster than we expect? Because we all think it's all going to happen all at once, but it's never the way it works, right? So, like haptics is going to take a lot longer than spatial audio, for instance. So, can you tell me
I'm
what? Yeah,
I'm referring to I guess coherent rendering, and by that I mean the graphics are rendered
yeah,
into the into the camera frame or onto the screen um, at a quality that's very hard to differentiate what's virtual graphics and what's actually the real world.
yeah. I realize that's what you're saying, and it's our sense of sight. But I was also thinking, what about realism with our sense of hearing, or our sense of touch, or our sense of co-presence? Are you thinking
Yeah,
about?
no, got no
Yeah.
ideas there.
All right. Um, So I just want to, is there anyone want to ask Matt a question? Anything that is like um, related to what Matt is working on that you have got lots of pressing questions about, please ask away.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'm assuming that everybody knows what is meant by the AR cloud. So if you don't, you know, add a little text comment or something, and I'll explain it. And also, I'm assuming that people are roughly familiar with what we're doing at 6D in regards to the AR cloud. So again, if not, please just add a little chat comment. But
I got a question.
I'm yeah.
Um, what are you doing in terms of because when you talk about cloud, it's someone else's computer. So what is the insurance of like ethics when it comes to the cloud? Because I've been interested in the AR fog for some time, and I just think the framework kind of really affects the overall long-term vision of it. So, yeah, I mean, we can trust the cloud, but how do we validate the cloud?
There's a bunch of layers to that question. I mean, obviously, when most of the time people talk about, you're talking about the physical infrastructure. Um, you know, do you say, if you're saving your data on, on Amazon servers, it's still your data, even though it's on their physical infrastructure. So I'm assuming that's kind of a solved problem. Some people might just want something saved on their disk in their bedroom and they won't trust it to leave their house, but others are fine. In terms of, control, like there's a difference between control and rights and ownership of the data. And then there's this idea of the data. There isn't just the data, there's all sorts of layers of data. So it's a really hard question just to answer. Here's the answer. It's I think one of the things I've um, observed is one of the biggest drivers of company behavior. And there's no insurance, but you can look at incentives. And the biggest one is if the company is making money by monetizing our attention, then every bit of data that helps influence where we spend our attention is, that company has got every incentive to capture that and use it to their interests, not yours. So that largely comes out, in terms of companies that are doing advertising or gaming, free-to-play gaming. And yeah, that sort of highly incentivizes bad behavior. But at the same time, it's usually free, and people say they care, people, public in general, say they care about privacy, but then when it's free to use the product versus paying for it, their behavior doesn't line up with, their words. What we're doing about it, I guess, is we're not taking a, attention or advertising based business model for 6D. We're taking like an infrastructure technology provider model where, the people will pay for what they use. The developers will pay for what they use. So at least we've got incentives to act in the best interests of our customers. And then the other aspect around this that's very hard to even talk about is a lot of the data itself, what is personal, what isn't personal, how does it technically work? Like if you want to do a relocalization, like basically get your coordinates of your phone, in real world, against a SLAM map so that you can do persistent and multiplayer content, and so that you can have a mesh pre-saved and things like that. That relocalization data is sort of machine readable, and people can't really use it, and it gets aggregated from like multiple sessions and multiple users, and it's anonymous. And if someone popped up and said, "Oh, hang on a minute, I want to remove my data from that, that I've uploaded," it's impossible to do that. And it's also, those relocalization systems are entirely proprietary algorithms. So Apple's and Google's won't interoperate, neither will Facebook's or HoloLens or ours. So even saying like, "Oh, it should all be open," just is a technically impossible thing, until the tech becomes commodified. So yeah, it's a bit of a non-answer to the question, but it's
that's good.
Quite layered. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that covered at least some of the stuff we're trying to work through.
Yeah, for sure. I just woke up.
Yeah.
So, Matt, I actually had a question about relocalization and what 6D.ai is doing. I was actually reading through the chapter that you put in the O'Reilly book on creating augmented and virtual realities.
Yep.
And you were describing the very, very tight integration between the specific map that a system is using, the way information is encoded, and then the hardware that's actually reading the environment. And saying that these are all basically so tightly coupled that it's basically impossible to have a common map that's going to allow people to relocalize across systems. So you're not going to be able to see something in both a Microsoft HoloLens and whatever Apple is building. And I always had the impression that 6D.ai was essentially bridging that gap. But is that not what your system is doing?
Yeah, bridging the gap is a non-technical description.
I mean, well, maybe not bridging the gap, but creating a sort of a common map so that people who are working with different systems can share a common, a shared augmented reality, if that makes sense.
We are creating a map that works on system, and that involves our own, relocalization algorithms that run on as many systems as we can. We're not building an interface that takes Google's algorithms output, which they don't expose anyway, and trying to, mash that in with Apple's maps. So we're not taking like a ARKit world map and somehow modifying that to work with Google's system. We've built our own SLAM algorithms our own mapping algorithms, and we've basically run that alongside Apple and Google's local AR Core and AR Kit SLAM maps. Their maps, their on-device mapping is pretty what's the word? I don't know. It's optimized for small scenes, and they rely on things like anchors and stuff to make it work. And Apple does nothing for you in the cloud. You have to take care of all it yourself. So we're solving all those sort of problems. And yeah, but at the end of the day, they have a local map and a local coordinate system that ARKit outputs, and we do do a transform into our own coordinate system, and we build our own sort of global persistent map. And this relocalization itself is a unsolved problem. It works nice in a living room that's full of nice textured scenes, but if you want to get outdoors and in large areas, and if you want to manage drift against the map and make those maps closely aligned to ground truth, and handle updates in real time, that becomes still a very, very hard and unsolved problem. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like you're doing something similar to what Big Screen does, in that they provide a common space that people in different systems, Oculus, for example, or an HTC Vive, can both, have their avatars and shared screens in the same space, even if they're on different systems. So, yeah, I mean, if I'm following you, this is a mapping system that runs parallel to whatever the native mapping system is on any given platform.
Yes.
But if both parties are using it, then they do have a sort of a common frame of reference.
Yep, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Cool. So,
Can you tell us some of the use cases that are sort of, what are your, I know you're infrastructure focused, but what are some of the things people are most interested in doing with your technology?
yeah, good question. When like I've been trying to hammering on these sort of problems for 10 years or something now, and first I had the expectation that if you built the enablers for some cool capabilities, then developers would kind of figure out what to do with them, and that's kind of the approach that AR Core and AR Kit have taken. Then I realized that didn't work, and then I swung the other way and went, okay, you have to build the whole stack. You have to build the application right down to the lowest computer vision layer, and control the whole thing, and build an entire user experience, and then sort of once people are engaged, then sort of open up the APIs. And I guess that's the approach companies like Magically, at an extreme example, or Ubiquity 6, at a software level, are taking. And I realized that actually doesn't work either, because you end up just having to bet everything on one particular use case, and the technology underneath is actually horizontally applicable and very, very difficult in itself to build, as well as the application is very difficult to build. So how we're approaching it at 6D is we've got some kind of informed opinions based on our team's experience in the space, and the use cases are all pretty obvious, but it's the user experience and the specific customer application of that use case that needs to be figured out. So how we've gone about it is we've had a bit of luck in getting a ton of attention for what we're doing, and heaps and heaps of companies have reached out. And we've just been working through all that interest and finding those customers who, really understand their problem and have tried to solve it, understand the technology, but they don't, aren't capable of building the technology. And so it ends up being a bit of a joint venture, I guess, not formally, but in the sense that us and them, work very, very closely in, iterating back and forward on, they'll say, oh, we need, we'd love it if the technology can do X. and I don't know, let's just say, we'd love it if the technology could build a model of this room. And we go, great, we think we can do that. And then we do it, and it's kind of, not quite as photorealistic as they like. And then it's a bit of back and forth. Like, do you need more photorealism, or do you want it faster and covering larger areas? And they sort of think about exactly what their business needs are, and we update our algorithms with some of the latest tech, and it's this collaborative approach to solving the use cases. And and that's working. I definitely believe now that's the right way to approach solving use cases for AR. You need two separate companies, and one doing the technology, one doing the application use case, and you both really need to know what you're doing, but you need to approach it as like, we're going to solve this together.
And Matt, I think it's interesting that you're working with customers, enterprises, but you've also employed like really professional artists who are thinking about it from like a non-commercial perspective as well. Why are you doing that?
For a couple of reasons. I guess, we're a business, so we're focused on the boring use cases and solving the technology, and that's, I think, always going to be like, that's kind of important to have that. Otherwise, you're just doing a kind of research exercise. And we're a startup; we can't afford to do that. But we're also ambitious. We think there's a huge opportunity to build the next platform for all types of computing, and it's a new medium, and no one really knows exactly what some of the breakthrough use cases are going to be. And it reminds me a lot of when I was, I guess twice now, like I started my career helping build up, dial-up and broadband networks and getting, PCs online. And then again, I worked for the company that invented the mobile phone browser, and I helped get, phones connected to the internet. And I saw this, platform shift twice, a new medium emerge, twice. And what was surprising was that the most successful, defining applications of the new platform weren't, adapting the previous ideas, onto, like, it wasn't taking Microsoft Encarta CD-ROM and putting it on the web. It was coming up with Wikipedia that everyone could contribute to. It wasn't taking eBay's website and putting it as a mobile app. It was coming up with Uber or Twitter that used location and real time and sort of bite-sized bits of information that were native to the phone. And coming up with these kind of native ideas was very unintuitive, like even to like me and my colleagues who were working full time on this stuff. So what I wanted to make sure that at 6D is that we remain kind of exposed to the upside, of a really innovative idea that no one had really thought of. And I've learned that those sort of ideas sort of often come from people with no real commercial driver. They're just motivated by creative expression, or just trying something cool. And that's led us to work with with artists like Massive Attack and Aphex Twin. It's working with Sascha Unseld, who is at Oculus Story Studio and at Pixar, and we've just hired. We haven't even announced this yet, but so don't tell anyone. But we've just hired Kevin Slavin, who is from the MIT Media Lab, and sort of one of the world's best brains on cities and data and how people engage with with these sort of large scale experiences. And we want to, as well as kind of just coming at this super professionally as an enterprise software company, we also want to make sure that we're always open and exploring and experimenting creatively to find out what might work that we'd never even imagined. So that's why I guess we're going to always do that, even though that's not our there's no money in it. But I think it could just lead to a couple of insights that crack open huge opportunities in adjacent domains.
Are you finding that your commercial customers are interested in working with this kind of talent? that this is something that attracts them to working with you, that you've got some very high caliber creatives that they then get a chance to work on with their business? Or is it something where they're just like open to it, but don't necessarily feel strong about it one way or the other?
Um, it, it, it depends. So on one hand, they're just like, the boring corporates are like, oh my God, that's so cool. How did you end up, working with this person or that person? This is just, you guys are cool, which helps. But then we start showing them some of the, some of the ideas. Like what's an example? The work we did with Aphex Twin, um, around creatively doing segmentation of people and sort of the visual, visualizing that. We've then sort of talked to a couple of music festivals and said, hey, look, you can do this for everybody and make it part of the festival experience. And they're like, oh my God, that's amazing, and we wouldn't have thought of that otherwise. We have taken work we did with a big real estate company, and we're then creatively modifying that output to come up with an idea for like a music video type thing for AR, where you can kind of reskin your world with a dynamic skin that adapts to the music, and that's got a whole bunch of music software companies interested, also gaming companies interested. So it's not a matter of like directly working, collaborating on a project. It's more a case of the ideas from working with the artists, inform and excite the corporates, when we show them.
I mean, working at a corporate and mentoring artists every week in this field, and I do that on purpose so that it helps us look beyond our own motivations, because honestly, like, even though I studied to be an artist, I work for a corporation, I'm paid by them, I'm going to be biased whether I think I can be, or even if I think I can be completely unbiased, I am naturally going to be biased. So having somebody who's not there pushing what we can do, but also saying, also asking some really tough questions of us, like, why do you want to do this? How is this going to affect the way we communicate with each other? Those really tough questions of the societal effect that this is going to have, and be responsible. But also, I find artists are also the most enthusiastic, like so excited about this potential new creative medium that they've got and want to stretch it. And we take that and try to build it into our tools, but it's kind of obvious with Adobe and maybe with other people like Unity, but what about the less obvious? Like, how are people taking like an artistic, we want to do this, and applying it, or to another kind of more boring corporate? Matt, do you have any other ways that artists have actually changed what you build or what your clients are building?
Not,
Or is it still too abstract right now?
it's a bit too early for
It's
us
too
right
early, yeah.
now. I mean, we've just from the work, we've got ideas that are probably we could spend the next year, working with companies, exploring them. It's definitely a case of, the creative ideas are, just like the, 5 or 10%, of kind of the work that gets done. So it has a huge leverage in terms of touching multiple use cases and multiple customers. But it's also, it's also fun, and you end up doing more of it, and then all of a sudden you got more ideas than you can ever use.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, definitely our time and energy and focus, even if it's not the high profile stuff, is just going into the boring customers and grinding bills and calculating the ROI and helping them save costs and make money and enable new workflows and all that sort of typical enterprise sales and delivery work.
Yeah.
This is Jessica. I had a question about how to manage the accessibility of augmented reality experiences. So, I mean, already some people have phones with ARKit and ARCore, other people don't. Soon glasses will be more ubiquitous. And so have you come across any really interesting ways that people are managing spaces where they're trying to make these digital experiences accessible to people who have like all of these different sets of hardware to see them through? And so I think this is, an issue for people, like even from just a retail brand perspective. How do you install something really interesting from an augmented reality perspective and make it so everybody who comes in can see it?
Yeah, I got some good news and bad news there. So, I mean, by accessibility, you're talking not so much about people with like disabilities and things, but more just like reach and getting out to everybody's device.
So, I mean, if you could speak to it from like a disability perspective, I would be interested in that. People who are differently abled. Specifically, I'd like to know about it from like a hardware perspective. But if you have other things to add, I'd be interested.
Yeah. So the good news, I guess, is and this is I made a crack before about how our segmentation tech is better than Apple's, for instance. Like one way is that um, our neural networks and our algorithms are just a lot more efficient, and we expect to be able to run the segmentation at the same time as the meshing, and have that running in real time, right down to like iPhone 7s, and be cross compatible with most Android devices, sort of Galaxy 9 and anything kind of better than that or comparable to that. So we're working hard to, and we're also engaged now with multiple headset vendors, both high end all in one type of devices, as well as kind of the low end phone tethered devices. So we're trying to get out on every touch point, and that if you build something on 6D, it'll have as the more reach than you know anybody else's system. Um, the bad news is, that's still a small sector of the market. And when I was sort of doing investing and even advising founders now, I'm still advising people that, look, if your business case depends on reaching a lot of people in the next 12 months, then you're probably going to die. Like your options are either do a good experience and target the most high end of high end phones or headsets, and it's going to be really expensive to build, or build something like in WebXR, or something that just like the most common capabilities of AR Core, in which case you're going to have something that's really gimmicky and probably not that compelling from a user point of view. So I just think really the answer there, sadly, is largely to wait, and basically waiting until the capabilities to build a compelling, immersive experience both can run on devices that most people have, which is still at least probably 4 years away, I guess, for everyone to upgrade their phones twice, and then there needs to be the tools to sort of, not just the APIs and things that we're building, but the actual creator tools, whether that's Adobe or Unity or Torch or those type of companies, to make the power of the APIs usable by creators. So yeah, I wish I had a sort of better answer there, but I don't. So any
Well, I'm wondering if, like, given that this is so, that like the technology is so niche in a way, unfortunately, I mean, are you seeing other use cases emerge where people are designing AR to not particularly be accessible and to design like extremely private experiences? Or maybe we
yeah
wouldn't
yeah
know
that's
that
exactly what
because
we're
they're not sharing them. They're that
Yeah,
fun.
that's exactly what we're doing. I mean, that's exactly where we see the market and the use cases. We're working with huge companies that can pay 6 and 7 figure projects to build capabilities into their apps, and and they're using them for their own like internal workflows. So whether that's a corporate that wants to extract data about homes that they're involved in selling or renting, factories that just need data, or construction companies that need data about like in progress building sites, and where they have needed custom hardware and stuff before, we can do that in software. But those kind of high value, very specific use cases that aren't going to be consumer use cases is definitely where the market is today. At least that's what we're seeing, and yeah.
And the market
Yeah.
is handheld phones, right? So augmented reality is not just limited to handheld phones. You could be using it on other cameras, or with voice and surround and spatial sound and other. How much do you think about the ecosystem rather than just the phone on the camera when you're doing your technology and working with clients?
Yeah, we think about the phone because that's what customers are asking for. They say, look, we don't want to have to buy every one of our employees a HoloLens, to do this, or a Magic Leap. We have to do something that works on the device that they've got, and it needs to be software, not hardware. And the other thing is that we're not seeing too much interest in augmented reality as defined being like content overlaid on a 3D model of the world. What we're seeing is interest in the 3D model of the world. So it's sort of like not just 3D scanning, but there's the neural network to like identify what things are and segment things out and extract meaning from that 3D model. And that sort of ability to understand the world via software is where the uses are right now, not as much
That's really interesting.
overlaying the content.
So it's the segmentation or the information about the world, the data, image tagging, or is it also the dimensionality, the space, the size of it?
Yeah, all of the above. Like, can this space, like, can I just push this out to all my customers and get their spaces, and then check whether all those spaces, for instance, are have access for disabled people? Are the doorways wide enough, and are there steps, and that sort of thing. What can a construction robot actually work in this physical spot? So quickly grab a scan and get the dimensionality, and then put a virtual model of the actual robot there, and see if it can actually swing its arm around and not hit anybody.
So it's really useful 3D map of the world, like the way that we've used 2D maps in many, many different ways for many, many different industries. It's kind of like that.
They're the use cases that people are paying a lot of money for today.
Yep. So unsexy.
Very unsexy. But so are mobile phones.
And yet.
Doctors and lawyers and stockbrokers and stuff, they got the mobile phone industry started.
Was it just, I mean, I really love reflecting on the past to understand more about what to do today, rather than thinking, oh, the future and trying to predict the future. What is some other analogies that you can think of? Like, I mean, the boring is definitely what gets the economy moving. But what else? Like, doesn't...
Well, I've learned, one thing I've learned about myself is that I haven't what's the word? I'm good at figuring out a vision for the future, and not only convincing other people about that vision, but convincing myself of that vision, and that really exposes me to self-delusion and sort of running off, chasing things that I think are next year, but are really 10 years out, because I see it clearly. And so I guess one thing I've learned for myself is I try to ignore my own opinion as to what the future is going to be like, and I pay a lot more attention to what people are investing in today, like either investing their money or their time, and I try and follow that, and just try and keep this whole vision stuff about the AR cloud or AR in general. I sort of just keep that as kind of a vague direction that the world's heading in, rather than a plan or a strategy that we need to work towards.
Don't you reflect on the past and see what we can learn from that too? I know we've had
Totally. I mean,
about that.
yeah, this is the smartphone industry. Like, it's just history repeating exactly the
Right.
way we've seen it before. And I'm as well as looking at how companies like BlackBerry and Nokia and those that were dominant companies just disappeared. Um, I also look at the successes of some of the mid-sized companies I worked for, and what they did right and wrong, and other mid-sized companies that if you look at someone like I don't know if anyone remembers Skyhook Wireless.
Oh yeah.
They were a company out there mapping
Mhm.
all these Wi-Fi networks to help build location-based services, and easy access to Wi-Fi and all this stuff, and they were kind of building a AR cloud type service, but based on Wi-Fi information, and that ended up just being completely subsumed by Google and Apple's cars that went around building street view data and map data, and they just grabbed the Wi-Fi data at the same time. So there's companies like that that are negative patterns that we need to be very you know we can't forget that, just because it worked for someone doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody.
That's right. Also, when we think about the mobile industry, and that we never thought texting was going to be a thing, and it still is today massively, even though we've got so many, much better solutions out there for communicating, but we still all text. Like, I try to think what is that today in spatial computing. I mean, that is the most boring technology. You wouldn't want to. Texting is just very boring, but it's so effective, and we all use it.
Face filters,
Face filters?
maybe, I don't know.
What about voice recognition and voice?
There's another use for spatial computing. Okay, so what are the surprising spatial computing things? Yeah, so I mean, the big one that surprised us is probably our biggest customer or at least our most high-profile customer that we actually can't talk about or name, but they they're in the real estate industry, and we thought they would want one of two things: either kind of a Matterport style, you know, scan my place for marketing purposes, scan this building for marketing purposes. And if not that, we thought, oh, they're going to want to do like AR overlays of information about this building, where to find the bathrooms, and a directory of the space and things. It's all kind of AR. And they were like, no. They're like, we couldn't care less about either of those. They're way down, the priority list. What we care about is actually, just being able to get the data about these places, and we need to be able to do that at very large scale and very low cost. And you can do it as software on a phone, and we can aggregate that data, and then sort of our and their neural networks can get information about these properties, and it saves them a ton of money. It lets them scale up their business. It lets them do new types of services on top of that. So we were quite, that was a surprise to us. But as they started explaining it, we were like, oh my God, this is way more valuable to you than any sort of AR UX benefit that might be incremental at best. But this one completely changes their core business. So that's a very big one that hit us.
Yeah, it's really good to hear that the truth, the reality. And I just want to do a little heads up that it is 9:45. Matt has to leave a little early, so we've got 5 minutes. Now is the time to ask any questions. Don't be afraid to ask silly questions, hard questions, boring questions. Now's, we've got 5 more minutes, so let's all keep chatting.
Hey Matt, we saw on social media that you attended the Computer Vision Conference, CVPR, about a week ago. I'm just curious if there's any highlight papers that you're really interested in, or any sort of tech that's sort of just leaving academia and research, and something that you think is interesting for productization.
Yeah. So funny story. Like I don't even have an undergraduate degree in computer vision. So I got quite a kick out of the fact that I was up on stage with like the research directors of all the major platforms, and I really had no idea what I was talking about. But my co-founder Victor, our chief scientist, and a couple of our engineers were there, and they just, I think yesterday, emailed on our internal Slack a list of the papers that they thought were of interest. I probably should try and post that out publicly. That would be a good thing to do. So
That'd be great.
While I'm chatting here, I'm just going to check with the team, and because it's posted on our internal Jira wiki thing, so I can't just throw a link. But let me see if I can find it and see what we can share.
Why don't I just reach out to them, and I'll post up on Twitter so we can. Any other questions? That's a really good. That's great. Some resources would be helpful.
Okay, there it is. Okay. I will.
Are there any publicly available apps on 6D.ai?
So far, there's only one, Bubble Rabbit. Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey for us in terms of this sense of just throwing our SDK out there and seeing what developers could do with it, and versus us, getting involved and jointly building these solutions. We learned pretty quickly that even if our APIs were everything we think they are, parts of the ecosystem don't exist, and that are kind of necessary for an independent self-service kind of developer to sort of pick up and build something with. And that includes things like how do you handle multiplayer session and state management, how do you handle multiplayer content, how do you create content, how do you script the behavior of the content when it's an unknown scene and you don't really know what you're going to get served up.
Yeah.
Then questions like reach, how many devices do you support and how many can we reach out to? And a lot of these sort of things we couldn't do anything about. So we realized it's quite, from our point of view, we need to be kind of patient and supportive of other companies in the ecosystem, like tool making companies, and sort of work to get that full workflow in place for independent developers. And in the meantime, while that happens, it's just going to be hard for independent devs to build something really, really compelling on their own without too much help. So it's going to be kind of a journey from this high-end not custom, but sort of high-end, like we're deeply involved in defining the technology, and then we'll end up exposing that via APIs and working with tools companies to make it easier to create with. And yeah, it's coming. So there's not too many apps, or there's only that one I think that's been released, and that's the reason why.
Okay, I think we've got time for like 1 or 2 more questions. At the most. And can you tell us, Matt, what is the next thing that you are working on and wanting to push out into the world? What is the most
set of features on our roadmap? Yeah, it's probably no surprise to anyone who's been tweeting at us, but Android, everyone wants Android. That's very close. So it's in trials with customers, but we want to release it when it's working properly, and yeah, fully cross-platform, and that's turned out to be incredibly difficult. So I don't expect Apple or Google or anyone to sort of do cross-platform meshing and segmentation anytime soon. We've also, our texturing, like our low fidelity texturing, is something that the tech works, and we're now just working out how to productize that and release that, as an API. And then, yeah, the people segmentation and the sort of upgrades to our neural networks that are coming on the back of that. So over the next sort of couple of months, those are probably the three main areas where new capabilities will be built into 6D. But at the same time, we've got tons of new customers that we're working with, and they're going to pull us in lots of different directions. Sorry, one last one is big improvements in relocalization and the performance there, performance and precision. So yeah, that's what to look for in probably the next quarter.
Thanks, Matt. Anyone got one last question, and then Matt has to run? All right. Well, next week we have. Yeah. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
First of all, I really appreciate you coming and spending your time. And you're in the middle of a lot of huge amount of work right now. So.
And look, I'm on the Slack.
Really interesting.
Ask me questions anytime. I keep an eye on the Spatial Assembly Slack, so you can DM me private questions or just ask them generally and tag me or something, and I'll always respond.
It's just been so interesting, as I love having these conversations. Thank you, Matt.
All right. Bye, everyone.
If you want to run, just run. I'm going to just give a few, notifications for what's happening next. So feel free to take off. Okay, he's gone. That was quick. Okay. He has they're going for funding, so it's like constant meetings every minute. So next fortnight, that's in 2 weeks' time, we're going to have Jesse, who sort of knows a lot about what's happening in the art world, and is one of the most knowledgeable, insightful people about how to build content and why we should, and has great points of view. It'll be a really interesting discussion. So that's in 2 weeks' time. If you want to suggest anyone who you'd like to host one of these events, please let me know. And yeah, this is so great. Thank you for all coming. We are trying to make the future of spatial computing not suck, and you guys are helping by talking about all these difficult, fun, interesting questions and understanding what we actually need to be building for.